So I just got done a debate. Does the God of the Bible exist? And it was something. I'm going to come back at the end of this video to talk just a little bit about it. I'm also going to jump in the middle of the cross-examination here and show you guys what I promised to show you during that cross-examination, which is an email from my opponent about how the cross-examination is to be conducted. But in the meantime, enjoy.
Hi, this is Mike Essen, South Florida's conservative voice. Who remembers the old debate between William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow in the Scopes trial? Or the Does God Exist debate between the great Christian apologist William Lane Craig and the late Christopher Hitchens? We got a treat for you today if you love debates about whether God exists or not. These two gentlemen have been on my show, and they're on my show again, and they are top tier. Representing the atheist side is a constitutional attorney, author of The Founding Myth, and he is with Freedom from Religion Foundation. His name is Andrew Seidel. Andrew, welcome back to the Mike Essen Show.
Mike, thank you for having me on. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay.
It's my pleasure. And representing the Christian side is Tom Trento. He's a friend of mine. We've been on each other's shows. He's director of United West. He's trained as a Christian apologist. Tom, welcome back to the Mike Essen Show.
Always good, Mike. Always good. You always got something going that's interesting.
Thank you so much. Coming from you, that's a compliment. I'd like for Andrew to open the first 5 minutes and tell us why atheism is real, and then Tom will talk for 5 minutes about why monotheism is real, or Christianity.
Well, Mike, let me interrupt for a second. The topic of the debate that Andrew chose is the God of the Bible, does the God of the Bible exist? Does the God of the Bible exist? So we have to have a topic in order to debate it. So
does the God of the Bible exist? Andrew will say no, and he will have 5 minutes right now.
So the burden on this is on Tom. Tom must prove that the biblical God exists. I'm not convinced. That is my position. Tom is certain. I reject his certainty. I reject his premise. I'm not offering my own. It's not up to me to disprove the existence of an omnipotent, omniscient, supernatural being that first appeared like maybe 3,000 years ago after 13.7 billion years of the universe existing. And then he did it in a tiny region that comprises less than 0.1% of the surface of the third planet from a random star, and that God's primary manifestations were a burning bush and a human sacrifice that he took a mulligan on. That God didn't appear to the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth, but in a mostly illiterate area so that those people could record his tales in a variety of 50 or 66 or 100 disparate books that are full of contradictions and errors, and for which we have few originals and hundreds of different modern translations. Tom has to prove that. And an extraordinary claim like that requires extraordinary evidence, but there's no evidence to suggest that a God exists. So I don't hold that belief. That's my position. That's the atheist position. This is skepticism, not cynicism. And it's the same skeptical inquiry you make with regard to unicorns or leprechauns or other gods. You don't believe because there is no reason to, and you're not afraid to say so. And remember, Tom has to prove not that a God exists, but that his specific God, which is only mentioned in this one book, exists. And so while I don't need to disprove the biblical God, by definition, his God actually can't exist. Square circles can't exist, nor can triangles that have four sides. And the biblical God, by definition, is impossible. God is all powerful, but he can't defeat chariots of iron. Judges 1. God doesn't lie. Numbers, Psalms, Hebrews. But God lies. 1 Kings, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. God loves everyone, John. But he hates people too. Psalms, Proverbs, Leviticus, Romans. Right? The God of the Bible is inherently contradictory, a square circle. It can't exist. Now, Tom may tap dance around these contradictions and try to square that circle, but once he admits that parts of the Bible aren't literally true, he's done. Because the only evidence for the God of the Bible is the Bible. And that's not evidence for God's existence any more than the Harry Potter books are for Voldemort's existence. The biblical God is a character from fiction. And from a fiction that was written at a time when humans didn't know very much. We didn't know about germs or cells, or that the Earth was a spinning ball orbiting a star 92 million miles away. Most people thought it was just fine to own another human being, as biblical law reflects. And that's an important point, right? It's a good thing that the God of the Bible doesn't exist. The God of the Bible is a tyrant, an authoritarian. He kills wantonly, commits genocide. In the Ten Commandments, he promises to punish innocent children to the third and fourth generation. In the Ten Commandments, he permits slavery twice. This God actually spends a lot of time on the finer points of owning another human being. He tortures Job, a, quote, blameless and upright man, without any reason. Job 2:3. The God of the Bible, the character is not moral or good. And Jesus is little better, right? Hell, eternal torture for a finite crime, is cruel and unusual. And the sacrifice of Jesus, vicarious redemption through human sacrifice, is also immoral. The death of another person absolves you of nothing. You must take personal responsibility for your actions. We teach all our children this, and it's immoral to say otherwise. My position is that there's no evidence and no good reason or argument to justify a belief in the biblical God. And everybody listening agrees with regard to every God except perhaps the one they were told to believe in as a child. And they hold that position after less investigation and reading an original text and philosophy. I've read the Bible many times. The road to atheism is littered with Bibles that have been read cover to cover. You're perfectly happy and willing to conclude that Thor and Vishnu and Voldemort don't exist. You even reject holy books and philosophical riddles as evidence that those gods exist. That position you hold is the same one I hold with regard to your God. So if you can understand why you don't believe in those gods and how silly it is to try to have to defend that lack of belief in the face of this evidentiary inadequacy, you begin to understand my position in this debate. So summon the courage to turn that same skepticism on the beliefs that you hold to, even if you've held them for a long time, because they are no different. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Tom, you have the floor.
Yeah, well, thank you, Andrew, for your opening. And the debates like this, ladies and gentlemen, are always, from my point of view, I've been doing it for a lot of years, always for the viewers and the listeners. You're always going to get, in my case, an atheist who well-rehearsed little psychological explanation of how they feel about things, which is fine. My objective in this 1 hour and 10 minutes together is to challenge Andrew's position and challenge my position as if we were in a court of law. So I want everybody out there listening or viewing to be part of the jury. I'm going to lay out some evidence to develop a circumstantial case. I cannot prove scientifically that God exists. Andrew cannot prove scientifically that matter existed eternally. So notwithstanding the ruminations of Andrew about the nature of God, he has the challenge of meeting the evidence as I present it. And one interesting point, looks like I already won the debate, because the debate title that Andrew picked, I gave him the chance to pick the title, "The God of the Bible Does Not Exist." He spent 3/4 of his opening telling me how evil the God of the Bible is, how bad Jesus is, and all the inconsistencies and errors in the Bible. So he's granted the proposition of the debate. If I stipulate that's the God, Andrew, that's in the Bible. Do I win the debate because I stipulate the nature of God that you have defined? I won't let you, I'll get you off the hook and let you engage in the information with me. And it's very simple, folks. We're seeking to determine that which is true. I'd like to hear Andrew's definition at some point of truth. Well, my view of truth is that which is in accord with reality. How do you determine truth? I'm going to give you a 3-part test that you have to evaluate everything we say in light of the test. And at the end of this exercise, you evaluate which individual made more sense answering the questions that both of us and everyone out in the audience has to answer. The basic approach is that when you make a statement, it can't have any internal contradiction. If I say today is Monday and it's also not Monday, that's not a true statement, obviously. Number two, the information that's presented has to fit the facts. You have a fact, you present information, the theory, the hypothesis that best fits the facts gets better grades. The third test for truth is that there has to be some sort of existential viability, that what you propose and what you're evaluating makes sense emotionally, psychologically. You can't believe a system that's out of accord with that which is true and real. I maintain that we put the hypothesis up, and I got a little diagram for the hypothesis. Either God of the Bible exists or the God of the Bible does not exist. That's the two theories that we're arguing, and specifically, the God of the Bible exists. That's my burden to prove that. That's what we're looking at. I'll present initially the fact that God exists. There's only two options. He exists or he doesn't exist. Both of us have a problem, Andrew, of trying to determine, where did God come from? I don't have the answer to where God came from. I don't know. Andrew has the problem of trying to determine where matter came from, because Andrew says there's nothing in this world other than the material world. I say reality is the material world and the immaterial. You'll see as I go through this, when I present the reasons why, it starts to make a lot of sense, and Andrew's atheistic position will quickly unravel. Number two, when you look at the grand scheme of things, you have to recognize that if there isn't a God, then we have to ask the big questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? What's right? What's wrong? And where are we going? I'm presenting right now that the issue of axiology, the issue of morals, we'll just start on that. If you have a God, 1 minute, you said?
No, less than that.
Oh, if you have a God, then from that God flows directives, love, grace, and truth. If there is no God, then the challenge for Andrew is to figure out what ethics are if there isn't a God. And the Bible, which we're debating, is full of teaching and direction on that which is true and right.
Andrew, you have a 2-minute rebuttal to what Thomas stated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to open my rebuttal with the immortal words of Vincent LaGuardia Gambini. Everything that guy just said is, but I'll try to do a little bit better. As a lawyer, burdens are important, right? It's actually important to understand what the burden is. You are trying to prove there is a God. I don't have to prove that there is not. It is an either or proposition, but I don't have to prove mine. I reject that there is a God. Now, you didn't, I noticed, really raise any evidence. You have to tell us why your religion is right and the others, which claim at the most basic level to hold the exact same truth about the universe on the exact same basis, faith, are not true. Why is your God true and the others not? Tom needs evidence, but right now, all he has given us is faith. And I mean, when pressed, Christianity admits that faith is the only real basis for belief. Christians are Christians because of their faith, not reason. And because he will assert his God so far without evidence, I can go ahead and dismiss it without evidence. Two things he did mention, gross materialism. I said nothing about that. I don't think that has any bearing on proving his case. There's a word for things that are outside the natural material world. It's called supernatural. And there's no evidence, none at all, that the supernatural exists. That's why it requires faith. To say that something is outside the material world is to admit there is no evidence for it in this world. It's to admit that one holds the belief on faith. So fine, I won't stop you. But faith is not evidence. As to me admitting the case, yes, if you will agree with me that the God of the Bible is a character in a book, I will happily take that as a win and move on. And I wish the rest of the world would too. It'd be a much better place. As to the final thing that you mentioned, talking about big questions that can't be answered, it's okay to say I don't know. And saying I don't know is not an invitation for you to slap your God label on it. And in fact, doing that has proven to hinder and hamper human progress. So I mean, I'm perfectly saying that I don't know. It's better than pretending to be certain and then preaching that ignorant certainty. I think that's far better. And you know what? I'll cede the last 10 seconds. There was no other evidence adduced.
Tom, 2 minutes. Rebuttal.
Sure. Andrew has the extremely difficult task of explaining how an individual can hold a position of atheism, which simply says that definitively there is no God. My position allows new information to be introduced. I'm a believer in God, but if new information is introduced, then if the evidence compels me, I'll move away from either a belief in God or a different belief in one of the other gods that Andrew has referenced. I happen to believe in the God of the Bible. I'm not arguing specifically for Jesus, who's the Messiah in Christian view. I'm arguing for the Judeo-Christian God that exists. But my position allows for me to be persuaded by evidence. Andrew's position is an elitist, intellectually totalitarian position, which says, I know there is no God. And you see it, you could hear it in Andrew's attitude. I don't have to answer anything. I can sit here and just not agree to whatever you're talking about. Andrew's the one who's come down 100% saying, there's no question whatsoever, there is no God, and there is no immaterial or supernatural world. Now, he's got an intellectual burden of showing how he can make such an egregious statement. That's one of his burdens. Let's move to the fact of the nature of God in the Bible. Andrew's referenced some very difficult passages within the Bible that make God seem to be an evil God. Hey, if the Bible is true as I believe it, you have to deal with that information. And we can go to the Jewish rabbis, particularly in the Hebrew Bible, who have explained this explicitly, the nature of God in a theocracy. When you start evaluating the evidence and putting it in place, so we're not going to have time to do all of that in 1 hour, but I always view these debates as stimulating true objective people to look at the evidence a bit further. When you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, they make, not only do they coincide, they fit the facts, but they make more sense than a position that says, there's nothing out there, I'm going to roll my dice. I'll talk about rolling the dice in a little bit.
Andrew, you have 5 minutes to cross-examine Tom.
Sure. So, Tom, you spent a lot of time there mischaracterizing my position, which I don't appreciate. But I'll ask you, since you said that evidence would change your mind, what evidence would change your mind about the existence of God?
Well, the main thing necessary is to show that the historicity, one of the issues, the historicity of the scriptures, both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament documents, are not historically valid because the arguments for the existence of God of the Bible come from documents of antiquity, number one. You have to show the, we can go with the prophetic elements of the Bible, the various prophecies that have come true, predictive 1,000, 2,000 years apart. If we move into the New Testament, then to present evidence that Jesus Christ, my Messiah, did not rise from the grave would. But
you're assuming the question.
Maybe not bring me over on your side.
But you're assuming the question.
On your side.
You're assuming that those things are true. I mean, the historicity, you just said that because books are old, that makes them true, which is, I mean, that's fundamentally
not what I said.
Flawed
not
view.
What I said, Andrew.
Then please restate it. I mean, I haven't heard you state a single thing that would change your mind. You're saying if the prophecies were proven to be not true, that would change your mind. Was that one of the things you suggested?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go with square one. We only know about, we know through oral tradition, but primarily we know through written tradition. If the written documents, now that the historians, the textual critics say are books of antiquity, if all of a sudden science, and that's a science, that has nothing to do with supernatural belief. If science were to say, oh, those books, Tom, where you go in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem Museum, of the book of Isaiah, those documents really aren't real, I would start questioning things. If
I mean, no,
evidence came that Jesus Christ,
but of course, they're real, but that doesn't prove that what they say is accurate. Again, I mean, you're saying it's true because it's in the Bible, and I believe what the Bible says because it's true. And this is the worst kind of circularity, and you're tacking on this historicity to it. Well, let me ask you a different question. If you knew that the biblical God, that your God was talking to you, you know it, no doubt at all. If you knew that your God was commanding you to kill your child, would you?
If I knew that he was commanding me to kill, yes, absolutely.
Okay, well then I rest my case.
What are you resting?
I mean, if you are willing to commit murder in the name of your God, I think I'll go ahead and tack up a win right there.
I just want to say one thing before I switch to Tom's cross-examination. We're not opening if anyone's on the phones calling, please hang up and call back when I open the phones, because you're going to be on for a long time, but I appreciate your call. Tom, please cross-examine Andrew for 5 minutes.
Well, before I start the cross, the little games Andrew's playing, you have to understand
let's take this out of your time. Let's take this out of your time.
No, we'll do a little cross-examination. And our cross-examination, I wanted to lighten this up a little bit for the folks. So I have basically multiple choice. All I want is multiple choice answers. I don't want you to go on and on. This is my 5 minutes. Andrew, out of all the knowledge from the beginning of time until now, all the knowledge, you have mastered A, 100% of all available knowledge, B, 50% of all available knowledge, C, less than 0.000001% of all available knowledge. A, B, or C, Andrew?
I would absolutely say C. I think we know very little.
Okay,
and
C.
And again,
and an atheist, number two,
claiming that because we
Andrew,
don't know
it's
things.
my time, Andrew.
Tom,
Andrew,
I'm answering your question. I get to say it. Tom, I'm sorry.
No, you don't.
I do. You asked me a question. I'm going to answer it.
I'm managing.
The fact that we don't know things is not an invitation for you to slap your God onto it.
Mike, you got to run the clock. I'm managing my 5 minutes. You could have managed it any way you want. Don't interrupt me, okay? Have the respect. Question number 2. An atheist is a person who, A, believes in God, does not believe in God, or C, is God. A, B, or C?
My position, as I stated at the outset.
A, B, or C? Don't filibuster, please.
My position, as I stated at the outset, is that there is not enough
violating
evidence.
The rules, Mike.
But you got to answer his
I am answering his question. I don't have to stick to if he is not posing the answer in his multiple choice, I get to answer it as I see fit. It's not my fault that Tom doesn't understand the atheist position.
Andrew,
Tom,
we talked about this.
Tom, I'm sorry. You don't get to define my beliefs. You don't get to define my beliefs. I made this very clear at the beginning, right? The atheist position is that there's not enough belief. There's not enough evidence to hold a belief in God. So I don't. And it's the same position that you hold. You don't believe in other gods because there's no reason to, and you're not afraid to say so.
All right, Andrew, did we have an agreement before this that each of us can use their 5 minutes as they chose?
We had an agreement that we would be able to do cross-examination, Tom. And if you're not going to...
Did I put in writing, Andrew,
if you are going to deliberately misrepresent my position in your possible answers, I am not going to answer it. I'm going to answer it as I see fit.
You have all the time and the rest of the debate, do whatever you want. You agreed in writing that I manage my time the way I want.
No, Tom, that was
time.
Tom. We agreed that I'll go ahead and publish the email after this. So I told you I was going to jump back in. Here I am. I just want to show you the email that he sent explaining what cross-examination is. I need to define cross-examination a bit better. Just think knockdown, drag-out street fight. This is an opportunity to intellectually and oratorically devastate the other person. Basically, no rules. Survival of the fittest. You can be a bully using a sledgehammer or a surgeon using a scalpel, whatever you like. Don't worry, this can be the most informative section for the viewer and listener and the most entertaining. So that is what He wanted, I was a little concerned about doing a cross-examination over Zoom because Zoom kind of edits audio and tries to get rid of echo and things like that. I was worried it might cut one of us out. This was the discussion that we were having. I said that he could savage me as much as he wanted to, but that we should have a gentleman's agreement, at least not to interrupt each other, at least not too much. Tom's response to that was, if I have any concerns about debate logistics, I should try praying to God to remove those issues. He didn't agree to our gentleman's agreement. Okay, back to the debate. So you talked about savaging your opponent with a sledgehammer or a scalpel. Don't tell me what we agreed to. I'm not going out of bounds here. I'm not going to do a multiple choice of your silly little test if it does not hold the correct answer.
What are you afraid of?
I'm trying to be truthful. I don't want to lie to the people who are listening.
Now.
You could correct it in the rebuttal.
We had our rebuttal.
Number 3, Andrew.
We had our rebuttal.
Question number 3, Andrew. You have a close. You have a lot of time to do it. Question number 3. An agnostic is a person who does not believe in God, does believe in God, or doesn't know if God exists.
So I'm also an agnostic. I also consider myself an agnostic. There's a difference between
You're
knowledge
an agnostic
and
an atheist. Okay.
Yes. There's a difference between knowledge and belief.
Okay, here we go. Excuse me. Atheists believe in a material reality.
Don't tell us what we believe and don't believe, Tom. Especially, I mean, you've done a good job misrepresenting it so far. Done a phenomenal job.
Andrew, you're interrupting me. Atheists believe in A, a material reality, B, an immaterial reality, or C, that Donald Trump is president.
Again, Tom, the atheists hold at most a conclusion that there is no God. That is not a statement about other things.
Okay. Now, question number 5. This question, requires
Tom, your time has long expired. I'm sorry.
No, Mike, he can't play games like that and not allow me to manage the time.
I'll tell you what.
Guys, I'm sorry. Listen, we agreed. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Both of us have places to be. We agreed on how this would work. I will publish the email that you sent so that everybody can see what you thought cross-examination would be.
Let's go to
whether or not this was fair.
Let's go to
and we can move on.
This is going in circles. This is going in circles. I want to go to. It's my turn to go to Q&A. I'm going to start with Tom. Tom, you mentioned Bible prophecy, and I'm going to ask Andrew the same question, but I want to start with you. Tell me, in your opinion, what prophecies have come true. Start with one or two, or a couple of them. That's okay.
Yeah, again, taking a step back, and I always feel for the audience when atheists start playing games. The primary prophecies, there's 200 or 300. There's prophecies out of Daniel, out of Isaiah that apply obviously to the Messiah coming. There's prophecies about Israel regaining the homeland at some point, which was unheard of historically. That's one of the major prophecies that impacted my life years ago after studying the scriptures for a while and then seeing the prophecies. And many prophecies obviously around the birth of Jesus Christ, where he would be born in Bethlehem, the lineage he would come from, the descriptive death he would die. There's 200 to 300 within the Bible that when you do an analytical study of them, they fit to a point where a lot of the theologians and philosophers, even non-Christians, have concluded that for all of these prophecies to be exact as they are, the mathematical possibility of them not being true is infinitesimal. So when you start looking at data like that, chunks of data, it's persuasive.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to ask you the same question. You've heard of the Bible prophecy argument, regarding Israel, the Messiah, Tyre. How do you respond if somebody goes in detail about Bible prophecy, saying prophecy is proof?
I mean, again, it's the Bible trying to prove that the Bible is true. Right? It's the same circularity that we just encountered, that Tom has evidenced throughout this debate. It's true because it's in the Bible, and I believe what the Bible says because it's true. I mean, again, this is the worst kind of circularity. He is asserting what he has to prove and claiming that it's true because of the assertion. Right? All of that is just evidence, air quotes for you people on the radio, from the same book. And it's not hard to do that, by the way. I mean, we know that some of the New Testament was written and rewritten to make it seem as though Jesus was coming to fulfill some of those prophecies. I mean, we know that the the virgin birth is based on a mistranslation. For instance, Jesus wasn't born of a virgin. And the Bible is full of holes and full of errors and full of internal contradictions. I mean, my favorite Bible story is the story of the woman caught in adultery. And it gives us that great line, right? That Jesus comes and he says, let he without sin among you cast the first stone, right? Awesome. Great line. Love it. What's he writing in the sand with his stick? Who knows? Really fascinating. Not in any of the original manuscripts. That was definitely, we know for a fact that was added later on. Probably because it's such a great story. I mean, so again, to cite that the Bible is evidence that the Bible is true is, again, the worst kind of circularity. And to call that analytical on top of it, and that the probability suggests it's impossible, is frankly, it's utter nonsense. And find me a mathematician. No.
Okay, I want to ask a question now that would favor your side, Andrew, but I'm going to ask it to Tom. Tom, there have been other stories like Jesus, like Horus, Horus, you've heard of that, and many other copycats people have talked about. It's not considered an original story. How do you argue to an atheist who says Jesus is just a copycat of Horus and Greek mythology and many other characters like that? I'm not calling Jesus a character, don't worry.
Okay, well, no problem. I wasn't aware that Andrew is a biblical scholar with advanced work in textual criticism, because in his very trite way, he dismisses the fundamental basis for examining all books of history, the science of textual criticism. So you have to start with the science of textual criticism to determine if the Iliad and Odyssey is real. If any book of antiquity is what it says it is, not what's written inside of it. So my argument about the Bible, which answers this question about the gods of Norse and all of that, my argument about the Bible isn't circular at all. You establish initially the historicity, the valid historical truth of these documents. They were written by those people at a particular point in history. Now, the story may not be true inside. That's open for discussion. But whether or not you can a priori dismiss history and say it's circular reasoning is a little atheistic joke that all of them try to do. Once you establish the historicity of the scriptures, then you compare it to the historicity of any other theological system, whether it's a Norse system, an Islamic system, whatever it is, and you evaluate according to that three-part test I said, whether or not each proposition makes more sense than the other. And at the end of the day, the jury says, you know what? A more sufficient case was done by that individual on that side. And that's what we're doing here today.
Andrew, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Tom.
I mean, he didn't answer that question. He didn't even come close to answering
the same question I asked him. I don't know if you've heard of Horus or other.
Yes.
Other figures.
No.
Is Jesus
So I mean, being born of a virgin is very common in mythology. Being resurrected from the dead is very common. Hell, being resurrected from the dead is common in the Bible. And just real quick, I mean, I hope everybody can see the massive flaw in what Tom is saying. The Iliad and Odyssey are historical in the sense that they are old and that we know those manuscripts exist and that they tell this story. But those facts do not mean that the Greek gods portrayed therein exist. I mean, this is just flawed logic and reasoning, just deeply flawed. Now, Mike, to actually answer your question, yeah, I mean, Jesus is a copycat to a large extent. I mean, those again are common themes throughout many different mythologies, and there's really not any evidence to suggest that Jesus existed outside the Bible. Maybe one or two mentions. This is not an area where I am an expert on the historicity of Jesus. I know several people who are. Probably my stance is right now, depending on if I decide to investigate this further, there's probably enough evidence to suggest that a guy named Jesus existed, though I think it's impossible and very unlikely that all the miracles and other nonsense, supernatural nonsense, the virgin birth, the resurrection that are attributed to him in the Bible happened. So again, all that is to say, there is very little evidence outside the Bible that suggests that Jesus existed. But I could change my mind on that question, because I try to keep an open mind based on the evidence, though I am not afraid to reach a conclusion.
Okay, we're going to have the fun part of the show and open the questions to the audience. I'm going to give out the number, and there's people on YouTube. We have a caller already I'll get to in a second, but it's 619-924-9749. You're on with Mike, Tom, and Andrew.
I cannot hear a caller.
Can you hear him?
I hear you.
I do not hear the caller.
Can you hear me, Andrew?
I can hear you, Mike. I can hear Tom and Mike. I don't hear a caller. I'm sorry.
Mike, can you repeat the question? Yeah.
We have a caller named Ron Ziegler on the phone.
Hi, Ron. I just can't hear. Mike, maybe you can repeat the question, Ron's question.
Okay, I will. Ron, do you have a question for Tom or Andrew? Okay, thank you, Ron. Andrew, did you hear the question?
No, I heard nothing.
Okay, I'll direct this to you, because he said even with atheism, and he was a former atheist who now believes in God, why can't people bring people to God even if you're an atheist? This is his question.
Why can't people bring people to God even if you're an atheist?
That's what he said.
I mean, I'm not sure I understand that question. To the extent that person is asking, why am I open about my atheism, or why do I talk about my atheism? Why do I, not stay at home and not do a debate like this? I mean, I wish I was able to. Unfortunately, we live in a country where the Christian majority will not keep their religion to themselves. They continually insist on trying to use the government to impose it on other people. They continually insist on trying to reach into the public treasury to fund their religion. I mean, there are many fights and arguments to be had on this front. And even if there weren't, it does still work to graft itself onto our public policy in other ways: reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, scientific research saying that we can't use stem cells and things like that. I'm not able. Christianity will not let me stay home and not talk about these important issues.
Tom, do you have a response to Ron?
Yeah, Andrew didn't hear Ron's question properly. He came out of, I guess, a difficult background, but the answer is very simple. Andrew, as a Christian, has placed himself in a metal box with no handles, no way to get out.
Tom, do you mean as an atheist or as a Christian? You just said that I was a Christian.
No, Andrew as an atheist.
Okay.
The other fellow as a Christian was asking about you as an atheist. He's in a box, Ron, and he can't get out of the box because he's denied half of that which is real, half of reality. So there's no way in the world should he, consistent with his beliefs, help other people come to God. It would be completely inconsistent. But ironically, that's what I found in most atheists. They're completely inconsistent when it comes to matters of ultimate reality. So Andrew can't help Christians, can't help anyone find God. It's not his job.
We have another caller on the line. Hi, you're on with Mike and Andrew. Hello.
I cannot hear again, gentlemen. I'm sorry.
Andrew can't hear you, but I'll relay the question to him. The two questions he asked: do you believe in something if you're an atheist? And what do you say to people in 12 steps who have to believe in, have to call to a higher power within the 12-step programs? Andrew?
Yeah, those are two really great questions. And again, atheism is a conclusion about one particular belief, the existence of a God. I've concluded that there's not enough evidence, so I don't believe in a God. Give me evidence, I'll change that belief. That doesn't mean there aren't many, many wonderful things that I believe in and love in this world. I believe in family, I believe in love, I believe in trying to leave the world a better place. I believe in working to end injustice. I believe in fighting for something bigger than yourself. There are thousands of things that I believe in. To say that God does not exist doesn't actually alter that. In fact, in many ways, it actually makes that more crucial and more important and more urgent. And the second thing, the 12-step program is a really great question. We know that 12-step programs that rely on belief in a higher power are remarkably bad at what they are meant to do. Far worse, in fact, than secular recovery programs that are based more on psychology and therapy and things like that. There's a lot of really good evidence for that. 12-step programs lead to a lot more recidivism and are generally far less effective. That being said, if that helps somebody recover, addiction, I'm sure everybody listening has a story about somebody they know or somebody in their family. We all know how devastating that can be. So however people can get out of it, I'm for it.
Hey, Mike, I gotta follow up, Mike.
Okay, let Tom give us more.
Yeah, Andrew, the gentleman just talked about the 12-step program. You stated in there that if there were evidence, you would change your belief. Number one, you got to quit your job as the Freedom from Religion Foundation. If there's evidence that'll change your belief, you're not an atheist, my friend. You're an agnostic.
Tom, please stop trying to redefine the terms to favor and make it easy on yourself. It's so tiresome.
Okay.
I mean, atheism is a conclusion that I currently hold. Agnostic is agnosis. It comes from the Greek gnosis, meaning knowledge, right? I don't have perfect knowledge about the existence of a God. Okay. So I'm agnostic about but we don't have perfect knowledge about anything. You're agnostic then. We don't have perfect knowledge about anything. That doesn't stop us from drawing conclusions. I don't have perfect knowledge about about the existence or non-existence of leprechauns.
Dishonest. You're not an atheist.
About the existence of leprechauns or other gods just like you. You are not afraid to say that you don't believe in those other gods, right? Are you? Are you afraid to say that the Hindu gods don't exist? No, you don't care.
Would you agree to the definition of the Old English Dictionary or Webster's Dictionary on atheism or any philosophical? You have redefined atheism to make it also include agnosticism. You're intellectually
Tom,
dishonest.
they're two different things.
You don't want to admit that you're not an atheist.
The referee has spoken.
Tom, they're two different things.
Okay. Please, both of you, the gentlemen. Is there any YouTube questions that are coming up at this time?
No, I have directed them to call in.
Good enough. We have no more callers at this time. I'd like to know if it's okay if you guys will make closing statements.
Yeah, I'm fine with moving to closing. I'm sorry, I don't. We can do more. We can do more exchange. We can do more exchange. Whatever you want. I'm open to whatever. I have questions for Andrew.
Okay, let's do more and more cross-examination because we.
And Andrew, you mentioned you mentioned in your answer to the gentleman about the 12-step program that you strive for things that are bigger than yourself, and there's more of a sense of urgency. That spoke to me as a Christian, that you're looking for something bigger than yourself. That's sort of an existential reach. And regarding the urgency, the issue of death, how do you understand death? What happens when you die? And what is this thing reaching for something bigger than you? What does that mean?
I mean, that's a good question. What I was getting at there was fighting for something that's bigger than you. And I don't necessarily mean bigger and grander in some sort of divine sense, but I fight to uphold the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution every day. I fight to ensure that state and church are separate in this country. And I do that for a number of reasons. I do that because there's no such thing as the freedom of religion without a government that is free from religion. So I'm out there defending your religious freedom to have these beliefs. And to me, being able to fight for something that is bigger than yourself is fulfilling. And we as humans get fulfillment in different places. That is one of the things that works and that I hold dear. I love my job. I love my work. I love to write about the work that I do. And those things are important to me. So that's what I mean about fighting for something bigger than yourself.
What about the question of
the death,
end of
the death.
life?
Yeah, I mean, the end of life is the end of my existence. I mean, there's nothing. There's again no evidence to suggest that there's anything. And I know that a lot of people listening will probably find that scary or alarming. But I mean, it's no different than what it was like before you were born. I mean, that wasn't scary or alarming. Neither is this. I don't want to die. I really enjoy this life. I think it's fantastic. I would love to do more of it. But, in eternity, I think I would be done with at some point. So I believe that the end of life does make everything not urgent in the sense that we have to do these things, but that there is a limited amount of time to do them in. And that makes
Andrew, I found in my experience dealing with many atheists,
I seriously doubt, Tom, based on your continued misdescription of atheists, that you have dealt with many atheists in your life.
Well,
I honestly am. Yeah, I tend to think you might be just.
I'll lay out why you're not an atheist.
Overblowing that.
In my closing, I'll lay out why you're not an atheist.
Well, let me ask you a question, because you've asked me too. No, Tom, you've asked me too, so let me go ahead.
Go ahead. And I got one more regarding
a child dies of hunger on this planet every 10 seconds. More than 3 million kids die of hunger a year, and Jesus didn't have a problem magicking up some fish and bread in your book there. So yes. Is the God of your Bible, if he exists, is he good?
Yes.
Do you care? You don't care to defend the 3 million kids a year dying of hunger? One kid every 10 seconds dying of hunger? You think that comports with a good God? You think admitting that you would kill another human being because you believe your God told you to, you think that's evidence of a good God?
Yeah, you asked me a specific question: is God good? I said yes. What's your follow-up?
I did follow up. So I think everybody listening can draw their own conclusions from that.
Here's the problem, Andrew, and I'll explain. Yeah, but let me. He's not answering the right follow-up, but I'll explain it. If my position is true, and it's 50-50. If you don't want to look at evidence, Pascal, a French philosopher, had a wager. There either is a God or there isn't a God. It's 50-50.
It's not, because you're omitting all the other thousands of gods that are supposedly in existence too, on the same basis of evidence.
If the Orthodox view of the Judeo-Christian understanding of life is true, 50-50. Here's the other end of it.
Talk about a big if.
Yeah. Oh, it's 50-50. It's either true or isn't true, Andrew. It's a very big. Your cute laughing isn't changing the fundamental fact.
No, you're defining all the other exact claims as yours out of existence for the purposes of making it 50-50, which is, hilarious.
When you're debating one of those people, You could ask them about their particular position, but listen to mine. Have the decency to listen to mine. If I'm correct,
I'm laughing.
If I'm correct, then this is the first half of this game. There's a second half of this game. There's the immediate life on earth, and then, notwithstanding, as Bertrand Russell said for you, you become a banquet for the worms. Notwithstanding that, there's a second half where the inconsistencies, the inadequacies, the horrors that actually exist today are righted in a majestic, supernatural way. That's the completion of the story. I feel sad, actually, that you're not even allowed to consider the second ending, happy, joyful, wonderful half of the total game.
I've considered
That's
it.
where all the justification comes in. Now, following up on that, why do you do anything if you're going to die and become a banquet for the worms, like Bertrand Russell says? Who gives a damn about your life? It means nothing if there isn't some eternal component to it.
I mean, that's you know what? I think I'll go ahead and address that in my closing, because I mean that's just
okay. Yeah. Which we're going to do at this moment. Andrew, you have 2 minutes. You have 5 minutes closing statement.
So, I mean, Tom, you had an impossible task. You had to show that there is a God, and that it was the God of the Bible. Not that morality exists, or that your murderous, bankrupt morality, you're willing to kill another human being because your God says so, that exists. Not that there are things that science doesn't know. Not that complicated things have a cause. Morality, scientific uncertainty, human ignorance, infinite regress, none of those things are evidence for a God, let alone Tom's God. Tom had to offer some evidence for his God. And not only is there no evidence, there's no plausible reason to believe that God exists. And of all of the things that we can explain in this universe, and there are many, none of the explanations is God. None of the explanations is God. In other words, we don't need this idea. It does nothing for us. So you didn't come close to carrying the burden. So instead of hammering that more or getting lost in a philosophical riddle or the definition of atheism, which you continually misexplain, let me just say this to the people watching at home instead. Uncertainty that Tom was just talking about is scary. What's out there in the dark? What's under my bed? What's that moving in the tall grass? Uncertainty has always been scary for humans. And the words "I don't know" in response to that uncertainty can be just as scary for some. But pretending to know something and being assured in that pretense is not knowledge. That's ignorance married to arrogance, not truth. And worse, it actively impedes the search for truth, especially when the idea of the Christian God is wed to our public policy. Being human is an adventure. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes our fellows can be hateful and despicable and even violent. Often they're acting that way in the name of their God. Representative Jamie Raskin's son, Tommy, in response to malicious gossip would say, "Forgive me, but it's hard to be human." And that truth really burrowed into me. It is hard to be human, but it's also an adventure. To say that there is an end to my existence is to concentrate the sweetness of every moment we have. That which is rare is valuable. That which is eternal is banal. We are on this tiny outpost, this mote of dust in a sunbeam for a fleeting moment, for barely a blink. It's up to us to endow that time with meaning and purpose. It's up to you. To say there is no God, as I do, is not to say that there is no meaning. We give life meaning and purpose. You can try to do good, to practice empathy, to leave the world a better place. Facing reality, embracing reality isn't a necessary first step, but it's a damn good place to start. And look, I get it. It is comforting sometimes to think that there's an all-powerful, all-knowing God and that this God has a plan for you. It's comforting to think that God loves us. He loves you. Except that you have to ignore that he does nothing to end suffering or childhood cancer or hunger or stop those one kid every 10 seconds dying from hunger on this planet. God's plan is comforting, but you're going to pray to change his mind when it's not. It's comforting, except that odds are you're in the wrong sect and going to hell for eternal torture. It's comforting to be certain about everything, except that you're not. Not really. You've got doubts and you ignore them as God ignores those children dying of hunger. Those doubts are the truth knocking on your brain saying, hey, why are we pretending to be sure about this thing for which we have no evidence and which doesn't really make sense? Just because other people told us to? Certainty is not truth. Comfort is not truth. Faith is not truth. It's scarier to think that the universe doesn't care what happens to you. It doesn't, but I do. And some of your fellow humans do too. We give life meaning. Do good. Love blindly, practice empathy, forgive readily, create beauty, learn with abandon, challenge tradition and injustice everywhere. Above all, find something bigger than yourself to fight for. Make a difference in this world and in this life because they are the only ones that we get. But also think critically. If you are a believer in Tom's God, dare to doubt. Think about this God like you do every other God. Find the courage to question. I know I didn't answer all of your questions today. Go out and find the answers. Don't accept certainty as a substitute for truth. Don't look for answers from your church. Instead, try to find and understand the other side. Find the courage to question. If I'm wrong, it'll only make your faith stronger. But if I'm right, you can stop giving the dwindling, precious time that we have on this earth serving Tom's myth. Life is too good to waste on bad ideas. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Tom, you have 5 minutes, closing statement.
Yeah, Andrew, maybe this Sunday I'll bring you to a church and put you at the pulpit. A wonderful sermonette that you delivered. Maybe you would even go for it because your poetic words about the good and the right and the just. Ladies and gentlemen, as I stated at the outset, this is to stimulate thinking for the audience. My experience engaging, debating with atheists, they hold to their position. It's usually a position because they had a bad experience with God. That's 90% of the, 10% of the population is atheistic. They had a bad experience with God. They're angry. And then from there, they move out and build a worldview and a system around it. But every single time Andrew used the word the good, the right, the just, and the truth, he's speaking theistically. He's an atheist. The A negates theism. He can't use theistic terms. He's cheating intellectually because from a materialistic point of view, and you notice he didn't want to get into that discussion. If there's only material, where does the good come from? We have chaos and we have material and we have energy, and it becomes the good and the beautiful and the right and the truth. Where does truth come from in a thoroughgoing materialistic system with no outside element or agent describing that which is good? You want to talk about atheism being involved in government? Look at the atheistic governments through history that became totalitarian and destructive. Why? Because there was no moral code. There cannot be any legitimate moral code within the confines of atheism. It's a fraud. They put one foot in the atheistic world and then they steal from the theism world for psychological comfort and justification. For all of you out there, why do I engage in these? I engage in these discussions. I feel sorry for people like Andrew. I pray for them. He seems like a very nice guy. He's very competent at what he does. One of the reasons I get involved is because there's a new movement going around, a new atheism. I call it atheistic nationalism. This is a system which is the foundation of Marxism. Atheistic nationalism is the foundation of Marxism. And it's mounted an attack against Jews and Christians in this world, particularly this country. Atheistic nationalism, and Andrew is a representative of atheistic nationalism, is the belief that the secular state must completely destroy any Jewish or Christian theology. You heard him say that or any public entity or any public institution. To these atheists like Andrew, and he doesn't know this yet, he'll come to understand it, the state is God. You see, atheistic nationalism is totalitarian. It's destructive to the moral order. It's destructive to human agency. It is completely antithetical to the founders and framers' view of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, but here's what we have, and this is why I engage in these also. Joining with an atheistic nationalist like Andrew and his friends are hardcore Marxists, Islamic jihadists, big tech oligarchs. You're seeing it all over the place. And the Biden administration, we'll get a little political here. The ultimate objective of the nationalistic atheists or atheistic nationalists is simply to have an anti-constitutional canceling of the voices of Christians and Jews, particularly in the public square. I can't stand for that. All my life, I've been fighting for free expression in the public square. When I see individuals like Andrew, atheistic nationalists coming along, I go, no, we have to engage, we have to discuss it and put it all out there. So the bottom line, as Pascal said, at the end of all of this, it's 50-50. If you adopt a theistic view toward life and you were wrong, you lived a phenomenal life that was rooted in fundamental principles. If you were right, you have eternity with God. Conversely, if Andrew is right, we all go to annihilation, a banquet for the worms. If Andrew is wrong, then the concept of hell in the Bible is simply separation from God. Andrew, by his own volition, his own free will, has chosen to be separate from God. God, a loving God who gives us free agency, will grant Andrew his decision and say, you wanted to live with me alone during the time I gave you on earth. I'll respect that time for eternity. And Andrew stays in that room by himself forever. That's eternal damnation.
I want to thank both of you. I hope you both have enjoyed this half as much as I have. I'd like to ask you both of you to give your website out. Andrew, you first. How can people find you or get active in your organization?
Sure. So, I mean, first, Tom, thank you for taking the field. Thanks for that word salad at the end there. I don't have to go eat dinner now. Much appreciated. People can find the Freedom from Religion Foundation at ffrf.org. We are a membership-driven organization, 34,000 members. We work to educate the public about what it is to be a non-believer and to keep state and church separate. FFRF is on all social media. If you're interested in me, Andrew L. Seidel, I wrote a book called The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American, which seemed to be what Tom wanted to talk about at the end there. Maybe we'll have to do that again a different time. Anyway, I'm also Andrew L. Seidel on all the social media if you're interested in finding me.
Thank you. Tom, just give your website out of how people can find you.
Yeah, they could find me at The United West. It's not theunitedwest.org. It's not a religious site or anything. I happen to be an evangelical Christian, but we work with wonderful Jewish people, atheists. We work with a lot of people because our goal is to fight Marxism, Islamic jihad, atheistic nationalists, to fight people attacking the U.S. Constitution. If Andrew was inviting me to engage on whether or not atheism or Christianity is better for the country, we can do that anytime you want, that's for sure.
I wrote a whole book about that.
I appreciate, Mike, you putting all of this together. And
I appreciate you coming.
Again, my goal was to stimulate thought in the audience, and we hope the three of us accomplished that today.
I think you both did a great job. Thank you so much.
Take
it easy, guys.
That was my first debate on the existence of God. And I think the closing was important, and I'm sticking with that line. Life is too good to waste on bad ideas. See you next time.